today. Our first panel is going to talk about how to build winning teams and how they think about that and what goes into that. I don't think I introduced myself, but I am Amanda, and I lead digital marketing for Logitech G. And I'm going to let the rest of the panelists introduce themselves really quickly.
I'm Matthew Potoff, General Manager of eUnited.
I'm Matt Nasha. I'm the head of esports at CounterLogic Gaming.
And I'm Kyle Batista, Chief Operating Officer at Complexity Gaming.
So I thought we would start with something really broad to kind of level set for the room. And that is if each of you could tell us how you think today about building your organizations.
From eUnited's standpoint, it's just finding the right people who have a good head on their shoulders, finding individuals that are going above and beyond the daily needs of just a normal 9 to 5. We have a really small team, very passionate group of people, and it's just utilizing that communication to build really good relationships from the staff and the player side.
Yeah, for CLG, we've spent a lot of time building infrastructure over the past couple of years and finding the right personnel, people that are thought leaders and that are coming from other industries that can help complement what we are doing to really help drive us forward. In addition to that, we're looking at what is esports doing currently that's correct, and then what are we doing that are missed opportunities, and how do we continue to expand and move forward in the space.
For myself and Complexity, we think that it's really important to establish a vision for the organization first and foremost, so that you're not wasting time trying to chase a bunch of different things. There's been some really solid examples of that with things like 100 Thieves, where they're very culture and lifestyle influenced, or Astralis that is peak performance and nothing else. So making sure to identify that vision for each individual organization. Complexity's vision is about optimizing performance and wellness, establishing something that's going to be there for a long time and making sure that our players are going to be able to play now and also have careers and lives later. So once you have that vision established, making sure that every single thing that you're doing is in line with that vision, and that's going to take you to the top.
That's fantastic. You talked a little bit about wellness and how you're trying to set that up. So what are the things that you guys consider when you're trying to develop your coaches and the people that you already have on staff?
For coaches specifically, it's finding the right coach for certain needs of the teams. I feel like there's good emotional coaches, there's coaches that excel in strategy. I've found throughout esports organizations have 1 to 9 different teams, and each one of those different teams might have a specific coach that caters to their needs. So it's just really finding that right balance between the relationship with that coach and the players that can really take that team to the next level.
And for CLG, we see wellness as a holistic approach, both because of one of my background in clinical psychology, but also to just the overall looking at a player in terms of their physical, their mindset, and ability to play. And so we have a robust infrastructure to help support that. On the coaches, I hold weekly coaches meetings, essentially teaching coaches how to elevate their ability as a coaches. And so we really focus on some of the deficits that we see in esports, which is not a reflection of any of our coaches, but more of the space just being young and new. When you look at traditional sports, you see different trajectories to a head coach, whereas in esports, we don't really have that length of time. And so what we're doing is we're trying to help them elevate as they're learning, kind of like on the job, which again is more a reflection of the industry and not the individuals themselves. And so we're truly trying to help them elevate as a whole to continue to progress in their careers.
When I'm looking for support staff and our organization is looking for that, one of the big things for me is keeping an open mind, looking for people that are going to be adaptable to the future, because I don't think there's anybody on the stage or in this crowd that thinks esports in 2019 is going to be where we're at in 2025 or 2030. We are going to be consistently making improvements and changing our methodology along the way on what we think is industry best. And if I have somebody that's not going to be willing to be adaptable and flexible and participate in that kind of research, development, and testing along the way, then that's not the person for my organization. We're working on various things to try to see where we're going in 5 years and 10 years, rather than simply focusing on what we can do best now. We want to be focusing on what we can do best right now, but more important to us is about establishing a better tomorrow.
That's fantastic. And you guys are kind of in the middle of all of this right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So this is very timely for us here today. So what are some of the things, well, you kind of already talked that, but what are some of the things that you guys are doing to address diversity across your teams and your organizations as you're looking for players?
What do you like to
And
do?
we don't always have to go in the same order.
Sure. Yeah, I can start. So yeah, it's an important topic for CLG. It's something that we recognize right now. We just hired a new staff member, Miss Harvey, Stephanie Harvey. So she is overseeing and driving this initiative just around diversity, both gender, bullying, just really looking at the space and what are some of the areas that we can continue to tackle. We don't have the answers, but at least we feel the first step is at least exploring the space, putting somebody in charge of this, and then we will begin to start executing. Additionally, we also have an all-female CSGO team, which is something that we're very proud and excited about. But right now, we recognize there are challenges in the space, and like I said, we don't have the answers, but at least we're here trying to go out there and try to work and solve with the community.
Yeah, at Complexity, we're really proud to be an open and inclusive and diverse organization going back more than a decade. We were founded in 2003 and had our first female champion in 2007. So really excited to have that be a part of our historic legacy, continue to employ a number of different female gamers as well as staff, and recognize that each individual person has something they contribute, and there's nothing in the esports realm that prevents women or anyone else from having the level of success as the players that we're seeing on the highest level of stages right now. So continuing to open those pathways for people of all kinds of diversity and making sure that they have the opportunity to be on the stage and recognized as top tier athletes is something that's extremely important for us.
Yeah. At eUnited, we're still looking for our first female competitor, just looking for the right fit. And
Putting the call out, guys. Everybody on
just
Twitch.
exactly, send your resume. And we're still looking for the right fit for the specific title, whether that's a content creator or someone that's trying to strive to become a professional gamer. But really what's interesting to me is the stories that we've had. There's a lot of gamers that have come from struggled backgrounds and very diverse cities where it's very hard to maybe get off the streaks, or their family had drug issues, and gaming has been a true escape for them to get out of their shell. And us, the organizations and the communities are really trying to help those gamers get out of a bad lifestyle and grow into something more.
Yeah, and that's an important part of this diversity inclusion piece, because it is very hard when you don't have the resources to become an elite player.
For sure.
It's hard to struggle out of that. On that topic, tell me more about what you guys are doing with technology in terms of how you're using it for your team selections and what part that plays in this whole puzzle.
From team selection, technology isn't really something that I follow. It definitely helps analysts and coaches, but from a general manager's point of view, I trust my instinct when I'm looking at a team. Just watching a lot of teams, doing a lot of research, and then just trying to utilize the information I have with our upper management to make the right choice on whatever player direction we're going to go down.
Yeah, from my perspective, what Matt was just talking about, we call that qualitative data. It's that gut feeling. All three of us up here have been scouts and player development guys over our careers, and you develop that instinct when you know a player is going to be good, but you don't exactly know what number that is that's attached to it. It's qualitative data. And for us, it's trying to take that qualitative data and start to quantify it. How do we actually impact the analytics that we have access to now and be able to translate that into something larger in the future? Because this isn't traditional sports. We don't have to have 45 different camera angles on the field. We have access to every point of XYZ data in a game at any given time. Developing the proper tools, developing the proper methodology, and allowing our staff to explore that and take that qualitative data into quantitative data, create next generation metrics to be able to actually pair that with the in-game successes, and generating micro goals for our players is going to be the next level of not only recruiting, but player development over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, so for CLG, we use technology once we acquire the player. There's a lot of things that we're doing internally in terms of watching data sets, and we're using technology and different measures and tools to acquire that, to watch a player over their tenure here with us. So that way we can we can track their progression or regression if it exists. And we're looking at just not their direct gameplay, but we're looking at other factors that may actually be impacting their gameplay as well. In addition to that, we have a robust data set, and we're very data-driven as well, just beyond these other tools. And so we're using those technologies to really help monitor the player once we acquire them. Because esports is a little bit different than like a traditional sports, we have a combine in different ways to kind of recruit. We don't really necessarily have the time to run players through these types of tests. And it's one of those things you kind of have to do in-house. And so like the guys are saying, like there is a little bit of a gut to this, but at the same time, you know, once we acquire them, then that's where we're really seeing the technology being used.
I want to dig in a little, because we've done the quantitative now. This qualitative thing I think is really interesting. And it can be asking you to explain the unexplainable, because if you say it's just a gut feeling, like that's hard to explain.
Sure.
But are there certain behaviors that you guys see that are really like the hallmarks of what you want to pick for your team?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, sure. So absolutely, there are certain things that you want to see, because I can have the best Counter-Strike player in the world. He can, you know, hit his shot 100 times out of 100, but at the end of the day, it's a team sport. And if they're not able to actually interact with their teammates, if they're not able to have the strong communication skills and the intangibles, if they're not able to meet adversity and be able to problem solve and have the mental resilience to be able to ask for help when they need it and to overcome these obstacles that they're going to be encountering, it doesn't matter how often they're going to hit that headshot, because they're not fitting in as part of a team, and they're not going to have a long-term career. They're going to burn out in a number of weeks or months, which is something that is a huge challenge in our industry right now and is not being addressed in a significant enough way, physically or mentally, and we're not going to have an effective career for that player. So we need to be addressing each and every one of those things.
Yeah.
From looking at a lot of players, having the ability to communicate with your teammates, like Kyle was stating, showing up on time for practice, watching film an hour before you know, your scrim start, just going that extra mile. You find those players and the intangibles that they bring once you pick them up. But really, when you're looking at the players on the outside end, you're looking at how they're communicating with their players, how they're acting at tournaments, how they're tweeting, if they're emotionally stable, if you're going to have to bring in some type of support staff to help that player. But yeah, there's so much that goes into it.
Yeah. Again, it comes back to like the initial interview process, which I'm still surprised at how many times I talk to players and they say this is the most in-depth interview I've ever had, and sometimes they just don't have interviews and they get hired by orgs, which is very confusing to me. But with that being said, you know, my background's in clinical psych, and so I really drill players, and I'm looking at things that are very, maybe a little bit different and not specific to their actual gameplay, and I'm really looking at how does this player complement our roster and what are we actually looking for, rather than just the best player, because the best player isn't necessarily always the best fit for your team in terms of the raw mechanical skills, and there's more to it, and it's just looking at the more holistic approach.
Let's talk a little bit about burnout, since that came up. Do you think that that's really driven by like team dynamics? Is it the number of hours they play? Like what is it that you think drives that?
Yeah, I think that it can be driven by team dynamics. If you get yourself into a toxic environment, it's hard to want to be there every single day. But I think going back to what I talked about with things like micro goals, right now, if we sit somebody down for 10 days and they're practicing, oftentimes the way that many organizations are judging success is, did we win or did we lose scrims, practices, matches, whatever it is. Sometimes you're going to be looking at some base level metrics and saying, hey, did I do well here? But it's not necessarily, hey, did I improve? And being able to establish those micro goals that show, even if the team lost 5 out of 5 scrims that day, each individual member made improvements on this or that, that's able to get somebody and say, hey, I feel like I did something here today. Yeah. Combining that with what we call esports 3.0, we try to treat our athletes more like traditional athletes. We provide luxury apartments. They're eating with the Dallas Cowboys, they're working with nutritionists, they're working in the gym, physical education, as well as personal trainers, and making sure that they're seeing our clinical psychologists and developing an overall really robust lifestyle that's going to be designed for the long term. Combining that with our state-of-the-art facilities at the GameStop Performance Center, it's really showing us that we're able to make really good strides in preventing player burnout, and that's really impactful for us.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. I would say too that there's a culture of we have to be playing the game all the time, which is something that exists, and the players always feel that that is the only way they can get better. There's obviously diminishing returns, and players have a very difficult time recognizing and understanding this concept, and that they could be doing other things that are related to the game and actually getting higher gains. And so that's something that we're really pushing and trying to get our players to recognize. There's obviously a lot of quality of life things that we provide within the organization in terms of having our facility separation between the work and life, which historically many esports teams have, gaming houses, which we've gotten away from. We have our chef, we have our player development, and so we're really trying to work with our players. And the first, I think, biggest thing for them is really just the amount of time that they spend playing the game. And then, of course, if you have bad scrims, bad results, it just only amplifies some of the negativity and the burnout they're experiencing.
Yeah, playing Call of Duty professionally over 3 years. My burnout almost hit on my second year, but I just continued to push on and act like nothing was wrong. But you're scrimming 7 hours a day. You're on top of that, you're talking to your teammates and trying to be a part of not the political group, but you're just going that extra mile to make sure that you're relevant in the scene. Then you're going over film until 2 a.m. and you're playing additional scrims sometimes into even 4 or 5 a.m. So as I switched over to the management side, I really try to strive to make sure that all my players are taking a day off. I absolutely force it. If I notice that a team is hitting their peak point within a day, say it's like 2 scrims instead of 3, I'll stop it at the second one and have them apply their time towards film or something that's a little bit relaxing where they're talking as a team and utilizing their time. But that's kind of how I've gone about, taking what I've learned from playing professionally and applying it to the general managing side.
Oh, that's great. So important. You kind of touched on it a little bit, Kyle, but I think there's a lot of both differences but similarities in how professional teams sort of operate and then how esports professional teams operate. Can you guys talk a little bit about maybe the similarities and the differences that you all have seen in your organizations?
Yeah, we're really blessed to have Jerry Jones of the Dallas Cowboys be our majority owner. So we built our facility, the GameStop Performance Center, there at the Dallas Cowboys headquarters. And so we get to see a lot of what goes on with the Cowboys every day and the way that they train, the things that are working for them, the things that we think could work for us. And we're excited to be able to learn from them in many different ways. And occasionally they learn from us a little bit too, in how we're actually working with our players in the facility that we built there. And we're really lucky to have access to Baylor Scott & White Sports Performance Center on our campus as well, with some world-class sports medicine doctors, and be able to work with them to actually establish the medical protocols for esports athletes in one of the world-class facilities. So being able to understand what the differences are between a traditional athlete that's focused a lot on that musculoskeletal structure versus the cognitive athlete that's working a lot more on their brain. But at the same time, there are ergonomic issues. There are posture issues and musculoskeletal issues that people do experience. And it's an epidemic, really, within our industry right now. And being able to work with them, as well as partners like Herman Miller, to actually combat those and prepare for the next 10 years. So we're not seeing 19-year-old players with 30% mobility loss in their arms. Yeah. We want to be able to have those long careers, long, healthy lives. And so that's something I'm really excited about learning for.
Yeah, CLG is majority owned by Madison Square Garden. So similarly, we get similar experiences where we get to work with the Knicks and Rangers. And I would say the similarities is the way their front office and the way they think and how that operates is very similar to the way that ours does as well. In terms of those differences, I think it's very difficult for players to recognize the physical wellness component of esports, whereas opposed to the traditional athlete, it's very easy for them to understand and recognize. And I would say those are clearly the most obvious similarities and differences between traditional sports and esports players.
Yeah, I think this year we're really starting to see a lot of players have hand issues, carpal tunnel issues. Like there's been 10 years of esports just building a relationship with how we interact and how we're postured, and really trying to take those next steps to make sure that your elbows are elevated with your mouse and keyboard and everything else in between.
Very cool. Well, we wanted to give some time for the audience to ask some questions. I don't know, does anyone out there, and I will have to repeat the question when you ask it for the stream, so before you guys jump in, know what I'll say. Yeah.
Yeah, quick question. You guys are talking about using your gut and quantitative and qualitative. Have you retrospectively looked back to determine how accurate your gut has been on past selections to get you some data?
Okay. This question was about looking at your gut decisions, and have you gone back to see, like, were those right? How often are you guys right, essentially, is the question.
For us, the best story I can tell is a simp. We picked them up. I picked them up for our cadet program for Call of Duty 2 years ago. 3 of those guys went on to the COD World Championship the year later, but we replaced him with one of our star players, and he came into our lineup and instantly placed second place. And then we went on to win back-to-back championships and accumulated $1.4 million in the span of 5 weeks. And he was just an instant back-to-back MVP. We wouldn't have won without him, and he just made that instant difference. So that kind of reinforced my vision with him and what he could bring to the table.
Yeah, likewise. I think when you see it and you hear it, you know it, and it clicks because the vision, the player's vision, and versus what you're wanting, like, really align. Similarly, like, Solomon is kind of that guy for us. He got second at the Fortnite World Cup. He won 1.8 million, and yeah, we just have a lot of those players. And to answer the other question, like, retrospectively, you know, yeah, we check it and we go back and we have those internal dialogues and to determine, like, is what we wanted actually what we got at the end of the day, and how can we do better next time? Yeah,
I mean, I'd like to shout out to my GM, Soren Vensom, who's a better scout than I am, for sure. And it's outrageous. He keeps lists of various games and even content creators that are like, these are the people that I think are going to blow up. These are the people I think are going to have incredible careers or seasons. And yeah, we go back and look at them, and it's outrageous how often he's right. So yeah, really talented scouts like the guys here on the stage. You can absolutely go back and look and say, yep, you were right a lot of the time.
I think we can do at least one more. Yeah, back in the middle.
Yeah, so it's definitely interesting learning about how you guys are, like, basically assigning metrics and analytics to basically every aspect possible to find new opportunities and new potential, like, growth areas. But what would you say would be something that analytics and the numbers aren't really giving you the full picture, you know, or you can't really assign it to this, or maybe it's misleading, or, like, down the road you're going to be like, you know what, even though the numbers suggested this, we're seeing that. Maybe it kind of ties into the previous question of, like, the gut feeling, where your gut is telling you something else, but the numbers aren't really. So are you kind of seeing that right now, or maybe you're kind of being like, you know what, maybe we shouldn't be assigning numbers to everything or putting as much emphasis or value on it?
Just to restate for the stream, and I'm gonna narrow it down. But this is times numbers have led you astray. As you're looking at data, has it ever led you astray?
Yeah, I think that numbers are only telling you part of the picture, for sure. You need to be able to have that qualitative, you need to have that gut, you need to have experienced people in the room saying, is this person going to be the right fit? Do we think they have what it takes in X, Y, and Z? But numbers need to be a part of that, but it shouldn't be the entirety of why you're making a decision. And we'll definitely see instances in the future. I think it's too early right now. I think everybody on the stage here thinks, like, numbers are definitely something we need to improve going forward. And I think it's probably too early to answer that question about times that it's gone astray, but I'm sure there will be in the future. So I think it's going to be important for everybody on the stage, in the room, and watching at home to understand numbers are part of the story. They're not all of it.
Yeah, I would also say they are a support piece. They're not the decision maker, which is also really important to know. In terms of, you know, what can't they do, essentially they can't tell you if a player's still going to be good in 3 to 5 years. Like, the industry is too young, games are constantly changing, games die off, meta shift, like, there's too many unknown factors. And so while they're helpful and useful, they're not the end-all be-all.
Something that I drive my players to look at every single night of scrims and just throughout the year is their percents. Like, what's the winning percent of winning a gunfight in this situation, and then winning that rotation on this rotation, and then whether it's a spawn trap or this and that, it's always trying to accumulate the best percentage for that play. And data has a huge part of that. And then I'd say our team discussions on how we approach those higher percentage models contribute to that as well. And then the management coming in and trying to solidify all of that information together to really give our coaching staff the right implementations for that specific situation. So.
Is that good? Okay. So this question is really about life skills for the players beyond, like, financial health, and like once they are past their gaming career, like how have your organizations helped them prepare for their future?
Yeah, I think this is a fantastic question and really, a poignant one for the industry right now. So within Complexity, we have a platform we call PPO, or post-play opportunities. So within that, there is not only what we've already talked about nutrition education, physical wellness education, the medical aspect, so making sure that they're taking care of themselves while they're in the organization, but also planning for the future. It encompasses education. So if you've got somebody that's pre-high school graduate, making sure that they have time to attend online schooling or get a GED, working with a major local university to actually help our players continue their education. So if they want, being able to get something like a sports business management degree or even an MBA, so that's something that we're working on as well. We do financial education, bringing in a major credit bureau to actually help our players to understand why it's important to have credit, how you can actually be planning for the future. We bring in wealth management so that our players are getting education on taxes and planning for the future, estate planning, retirement, all of these things. And additionally, we do provide opportunities for some players for actual business positions within the organization. Interning with us, learning the actual business side, whether that's accounting, whether that's talent management, or even looking at something such as legal, understanding the way that the business works behind and maybe promoting their education there as well. We have a number of different players in our organization that went on to be either coaches, analysts, or even work on the business side of things, including myself. I was a player before I got into the business side at Complexity, so it's really an exciting place to be.
Yeah, it's a really important question, something that we recognize exists. Player careers can be very short, and so I see it more of a kind of moral obligation. Most players typically are 18 to 22, which is typically when you go to college, and they're missing out on a lot of life experiences, and so we try to complement that where we can. Our head of player development, she provides a lot of these resources, everything from financials, you name it, she's really trying to encompass it. And as an organization, we are trying to share with the players, what are you going to be doing after? How can we help you? What are some of the things that you want to do within esports? And if it's building up their content, if it's building up their ability to go out and get partners for sponsors after their career is over, we're having these conversations early on, so that way we can prepare them, because, like I said, it's a really important time in their life. And they could be missing out on additional opportunities if their career did end prematurely. And so we really want to set them up for success moving forward.
I always tell my players, put 20% in the bank off everything they win, just because these guys are, there's different times throughout the year where they're getting a big check from tournaments, and they just need to constantly reiterate that they need to save and save and save. But just to go back to the coaching staff, like, these guys are not only building a relationship with the players for the game, but finding coaches that are taking that extra 1 or 2 hours just to talk to a player that might be struggling with something, like personally, or is trying to figure out what they're going to do in the future. Like, those are the coaches and the managers that are truly making a difference right now. They're not just like getting off at their scrims or over there, just taking that time to talk through issues, balance their life out. And it's really, really important that you're taking those extra measures to look out for the player's best interest.
Very cool. I think with that, we are out of time. So thank you very much, everyone in attendance, everyone listening, and for our panelists here.